what I find hilarious is that whole documentary is based around that stupid meme about that Jack could have fit on the
Right.
door, which was not the door, doesn't even look like the door, and I wish people would stop saying it's a door. It's paneling.
We know.
So
We know. We're good.
he did a whole experiment on if two people would fit on that piece of wood paneling, and turns out they could. But he also said that he doesn't care because that's how he wrote the script. And I agree with him. I don't even know why that's even controversy. He wrote the script. It's his characters. That's how the story
He can
was
do what he
supposed to
wants.
go.
You never
Yeah,
let the
well-
truth get in the way of a good story. That's
Exactly.
number one.
And on that note,
Titanic Talk with Nelson Aspen and Alexandra Boyd. Here we feature stories from the independent documentary Ship of Dreams Titanic Movie Diaries and everything else to do with the iconic ship. From James Cameron's epic groundbreaking movie to the history and legacy of Titanic herself. Join us and our special guests as we continue the 25th anniversary celebrations of Titanic. This is your first-class ticket to everything aboard the Ship of Dreams.
I'm Nelson Aspen, and we're back with Titanic Talk alongside my beautiful co-host, Alexandra Boyd, the filmmaker behind Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries. It still seems like a dream as we continue to expand our Titanic Talk family. And today we're going to introduce you to Evgueni Mlodik, who we'll just call Yev for sake of ease. And what's marvelous about Yev is that he came to us, he approached us through, one of our Titanic degrees of separation, and he has a rich history in the film history of Titanic, and not just James Cameron's version or Alexandra Boyd's documentary version, but all of the things that we see, the dramatizations, the documentaries, even just sort of drive-by Titanic references. So it's a real treat and a privilege to talk to you today, Yev, and get a little bit of your expertise, if you don't mind.
Of course, it would be more than it's an honor.
And we have to ask you, though, have you seen Alexandra's documentary yet? If not, we have to make sure that that's on your to-screen list.
I have not. I've been trying to. I can't figure out where I can see it. So
yeah, it's not currently. I have to apologize. We did have it briefly out and available, and now we're working with a sales agent. So very soon we'll be able to share it with you and lots more people, hopefully. So
and then you'll be in for a treat, and it won't be on your list of Titanic exploitation films, which there certainly are many. As those of us who scroll through the channels looking for anything related to Titanic, there is no shortage of fodder out there. And you gave me this great list. So let's talk. And I asked you specifically if we can try to because there is so much, try to keep it to around material that is current with James Cameron's Titanic or since then. And you came up with The Rise and Fall and Rise Again. Talk about these films.
Right. So Titanic exploitation, basically it's anything that's related to Titanic that has, let's say, a less than honorable genesis. There's like no historical or artistic interest other than James Cameron's movie made $2 billion. Let's do this. It was really hard to actually prune this list because, the amount of documentaries and TV shows that came in the wake of James Cameron's film, it's overwhelming. So we'll see how well I did.
I just like to interject and say that I am now a fully fledged Titaniac, I believe, based on having 25 years ago been cast in James Cameron's Titanic and now 25 years later making my own expression of what it was like to be in that film and the people like yourself that I'm meeting. I'm astonished at how many films are on your list that, again, as you said, you had to prune. And maybe we can talk a little bit about that first. Is like you've said, they made $1 billion, so we can make some money out of this subject matter, which is so engaging for so many people. And what you're saying is that sometimes there are these rather woolly attempts at making something out of a 25-second, movie, newsreel.
And that is correct, which was mentioned in all the documentaries that came in the wake of James Cameron's film. 98 and 99, there was people were pretty much like, people were like demolished, like all the Discovery Channel History Channel, like it was just, people were, pardon the pun, drowning in this overwhelming Titanic content, most of which like wasn't even really good. It was, I mean, I remember as a child watching it with my jaw dropped, because I wasn't even I think I was 11, if not 10, when the movie came out, when James Cameron.
But you were already into Titanic before that.
Oh, yeah, I was.
You've been a lifelong fan.
Yeah. Since I grew up in Russia as a small child, they were airing SOS Titanic, the 79 movie, back to back with Raise the Titanic on Russian television constantly for some reason. And, you know, at 4 years old, impressionable me, I watched it, and something in my brain just snapped. And here we are 30 years later.
That's how it happens. Heard it over and over. It takes one.
I love it. Start with anticipating the Ice Buster. You say anticipating the Ice Buster, and I remember these.
So it started with 3 films, like early 96 is when we started, like when all the buzz started happening around James Cameron's filming in Mexico. It started, we started with Danielle Steele's No Greater Love. Danielle Steele, she's a successful romance novel
I bought
writer.
the book because the Titanic was on the book cover.
Exactly.
You know,
the book, it's kind of and the book actually is pretty good. There's a good 100-page chunk of it is about the Titanic, like the first act of the book. However, the movie doesn't really have the budget or the time. You know, it's a 90, well, without commercials, it's like an 80-minute movie that they don't have much time to give it justice. So here's what they did. So the basic premise is, which is actually a rehash of at least like 3 other Danielle Steele romance novels. A young woman, very privileged, very wealthy. Her life is upended by a major historical cataclysm. And what happens afterwards is that she's stuck raising a bunch of little ungrateful little kids, while like progressing through like a series of increasingly bland lovers, until she realizes her family is the true love and passion of her life. And the only thing that changes in those books are it can be either Titanic, Russian Revolution, right, World War I, World War II, pick. So
who needs artificial intelligence when you have that formula?
Yeah, literally, I think she just has this template saved on her Word, on her Microsoft Word, and she was just like, change World War II to Titanic. Oh, I have a new book. So in the No Greater Love, it's very like the first 10 minutes is Titanic. And that was obviously, and they picked No Greater, they do like, I think every 6 months they were releasing a new Danielle Steele TV movie on NBC, and there was a reason why they chose No Greater Love in 96. Like, let's be honest, there was a reason for that. And they didn't really have a lot of money to film Titanic, so virtually everything was like, every single scene and shot that didn't feature the main characters were taken from SOS Titanic, which means they also used footage from A Night to Remember, which was also used in SOS Titanic. So it became like stock footage. It was like Inception, stock footage of stock footage of stock footage, including stock footage from Monster Go Home, which used stock footage from a movie called Remember the Night. A colorized photo of like a colorized footage of a ship that looks nothing like Titanic sailing in the ocean.
Interesting. You mentioned in the, you know, from Danielle Steele, you go on to mention Titanic, the miniseries, and you call it a mockbuster that docked too early. And is that because it came out before James Cameron?
Yes, it was supposed to coincide around the same time. It came out in November of 96. And what happened was, at that time, everybody thought James Cameron movie is going to come out a few months later in June or July.
And let me tell you too, we all knew that TV series was being filmed at the same time we were in Mexico filming, and we were like, that's kind of bad timing, isn't it? Like, who's going to win? Because
is that the Catherine Zeta-Jones one with Tim Curry and Catherine Zeta-Jones? That one,
but it wasn't known as a Catherine Zeta-Jones one at the time because she wasn't really famous. It was before she got her big break, so it was more of a. Is that the one with with Tim Curry and George C. Scott.
Right.
If only Catherine had auditioned for the next one on your list, the chambermaid of the Titanic. Now, I'd never heard of the chambermaid of the Titanic. I'm sure there were several of them, including our pal Trudy Bolt. But which one? What? Tell me about chambermaid of the Titanic.
Well, just a quick thing about the miniseries, though. The miniseries was, to be fair, it was based on a script that was written like in the early 90s as a TV miniseries by Ross LaManna, who gave us the Rush Hour movies, oddly. And it was deemed unproducerable, if that's even the word. It was like for a TV miniseries because it was deemed too ambitious and too big budget. And when they heard that the James Cameron film was being made, they dug it out. They had a soap opera writer rewrite it into something cheaper and more salacious. There's a reason why it's been nicknamed Titanic Special Victims Unit in some circles. And it was shot on a very small budget in Vancouver. In fact, one of my favorite scenes in that entire movie is the quintessential third-class passengers locked below on a stairwell. You can tell they were filming in the mid-century office building in Vancouver. They just put a gate on a stairwell and like a first-class only sign. Like
Canada stands in for everything.
It stands in for everything. So now, but yeah, it came out in November 96. They thought the James Cameron movie was going to come out soon. It got delayed. So it literally had no coattails to ride on. So it just kind of fizzled out because the James Cameron movie came out a year later. So yeah, moving on to chambermaid on the Titanic. Now it was directed by a man named Bigas Luna. I knew about him before. He's kind of a really maybe controversial. He's a very pretentious filmmaker from Spain. He thinks he's like the next. He thought. I don't think he still makes movies. He was like going to be this Fellini, Bernardo Bertolucci of Spain. So he made this French co-production about a man who has this let's just say sensual obsession with a chambermaid that he met that was due to work on the sail on the Titanic, to work as a chambermaid. They have an affair, she sails, she dies, and then he spends the rest of the movie obsessing over her and doing like lecture tours, like where he talks about his fantasy about her. And what really always, even as a child, what always bothered me about the title of the movie is that apparently it was a French, German, Spanish, Italian co-production, and apparently none of those languages have the word for stewardess, so it's chambermaid.
Okay.
I mean, it's a joke. I'm sure they do, but it just bothered me that it was called I guess stewardess on the Titanic sounds weird. So originally the film did not have actual footage of Titanic. Like it just started with her already dying, like of them having the affair and her dying. But because once again, James Cameron movie was a few days away, they filmed a prologue of Titanic in Southampton. And it's the most adorable like scale model, like a Revell one you buy for $30 at like Hobby Lobby. And it's just really badly superimposed on a really bad Southampton harbor. And it's just precious to watch how hard they try to like take this pretentious erotic art film and even make that part of the Titanic zeitgeist.
One thing that's really sort of standing out to me from your list and listening to you talk is that it must have really highlighted to you and other people who are so embedded in the way Titanic has been told in film form, is that James Cameron's attention to detail and the money they spent. It cost money to make that ship, and all the CGI, all the models, all the sets, it costs a horrendous amount of money to recreate us feeling like we were sailing in 1912 on the Titanic. And if you miss that mark because you don't have the budget and you're reduced to a Hobby Lobby model of Titanic, making sure the last funnel doesn't have any smoke coming out of it, you're almost set up to fail. It's and I'm
even
because there is very few problems that you can't solve in my industry without throwing some money at it. And if you don't, people who have the attention to detail and are as passionate about it as you are going to make it fall short, are going to see the shortcomings.
Well, even the 96, when like all these little like idiosyncrasies, like in the 96 miniseries, I know it's like taking pot shots, but in the dining room, the first class dining room, none of the chairs match. They couldn't even afford to get matching 100 chairs or whatever for the
But
dining
that's
room.
what separates a filmmaker and an auteur like James Cameron from a television director or a soap opera writer who's like, oh, I have to, weave in something that's more interesting than 15 people losing their lives on an icy night in the North Atlantic.
But there was no budget for these other films to compare to Cameron's, which is why I love the title of your next section you gave us. Documentaries are cheaper than fiction. And still to this day, at any given time of the day or night, you can turn on the television and find a documentary about, whether it's about the rivets or the smokestacks or a passenger or what. There is something at all times. Tell me some of your notable documentaries.
Okay, so yeah, this was really, really hard to condense. So that was the hardest section. So yeah, let's see. Let's start with the Titanic Anatomy of a Disaster. So this is when Discovery Channel started realizing that Titanic is where the money is. I loved it as a child. Just a quick, all of these documentaries, I remember watching them as a child, and I thought they were amazing. Rewatching them as an adult, it's a lot of cringe, and it's just. So Anatomy of a Disaster, it just really annoyed me. It's all all these. It was like hindsight. The documentary. Oh, if they would have gone slower. Oh, if the bulkheads would have been higher. Oh, wow, those are such earth-shattering. I mean, yeah, we know it now, but not in 1912 when that was the safest you could get with the ship. But it had the word Titanic in it. I'm sure it got huge ratings for a basic cable. And yeah, it had all the interviews with all the right people: Don Lynch, Ken Marshall, Robert Ballard. But as I said, it's just in recent years when I actually talked to these people, well, I haven't talked to Robert Ballard, but I talked to Don Lynch, I talked to Bill Sauter, Eric Sauter. They said a lot of those documentaries have twisted their words and did some creative editing. So even stuff that they allegedly said
imagine that.
Yeah, shouldn't be taken at full value. So the next echoes from the Titanic, I hold it in high regard because this is where I found out that the first true big budget epic Titanic film was made in Nazi Germany. But that's like a conversation for a whole other podcast. It's a very bizarre documentary because all of the footage is taken from at least 3 other documentaries made in 1992 for the 80th anniversary. They use snippets from The Making of a Night to Remember and Remembering the Titanic and a few other old ones. So you can tell all those. You could tell the footage looks very old videotape, even compared to 90, even by 98 standards. And they do a clip show of various Titanic films, but they don't mention James Cameron's film. It was hobbled together from old documentaries to, make some money off of that. And then we go to one of my most of the 98 cash grab documentaries. I think this is the one I have the most content with. It has good production values. It's called Titanic Secrets Revealed. So if you're noticing, very salacious. I know that word didn't exist back then, but clickbaity titles that they give those documentaries. Basically, it was filmed on the Queen Mary. They did some reenactments on the Queen Mary, and the host, which was Bernard Hill, who played Captain Smith. He was the host. They did some reenactments on the Queen Mary because, if you can't afford to build a Titanic set, you just go to Long Beach and you film on the Queen Mary. It's the reason I don't quite like that documentary is because they had this kind of a Fox News approach. Well, not just Fox, a news show approach to it, is that they dredge up all these myths about they do the Olympic switch, bad rivets, third class
conspiracy theories, all the classic conspiracy theories.
Yes. But then, after going into so much detail about the conspiracy theory, they just gloss over, but it's not true. Anyway, moving on to the next conspiracy theory. The worst part is that they kept calling third class White Star Line's dirty little secret, even though in reality, White Star Line's biggest business model was was superior third class accommodations, because they knew that the passengers would tell their family members who would then immigrate on White Star Line ships. If anything, it's the German ships who should be ashamed of their third class accommodations.
Well, I think this is very clever. You talk about the next one as being they were able to take a 25-second film reel clip and turn it into a full 30-minute production.
Yes, lost film of the Titanic is kind of hilarious, especially since I remember I bought the VHS as a little kid, and it was like almost $30, even in '98 money, and being a little kid. I bought it for my birthday, and I was so excited. What they basically did was they found footage of Titanic at the graving dock in Belfast, still being painted. You can see it's still not finished. And it's literally like a 20-second reel of just like somebody pans their camera back and forth like the Titanic docked, and that's it. The rest, once again, old documentaries from the 80s and early 90s, like built around it.
How did your young self feel? Did you feel very cheated?
I think I threw things at
excitement and the disappointment.
I think I threw things at my TV, to be honest, because all of the stuff that they padded with, that was like what I already seen in other documentaries. So I just felt, it was nice to see actual Titanic footage versus Olympic, but it was just 10 seconds for 20 seconds for $30. So
that's a good time to point out the fact that, even as your young self, you were a very sophisticated Titanic aficionado, which is what led you to pursue a film career. Now, you have a footprint in the film industry. You've offered commentary on the Blu-ray of SOS Titanic. So you've managed to unite your worlds of profession and passion.
It all came full circle, I guess, because SOS Titanic started my passion, and then when I got to do the commentary for the Kino Lorber release.
I want to talk about James Cameron while we have a few minutes left. The James Cameron reclaims what's his. Alexandra and I vividly remember going to see Ghosts of the Abyss at the theater, at the cinema in Los Angeles, and the excitement. Nothing really from his Titanic film of '97. There was really not much in Ghosts of the Abyss, but there was a beautiful shot of Alexandra in Ghosts of the Abyss, and we screamed in the movie theater. We were so excited.
Because we were so surprised. We had been lulled into thinking, oh, this is all new footage, and we know Judy Prestonency, our core extra, she was called back to, and some of the other extras to reenact walking on the deck or sitting in, first class, and then they snuck in my shot with the first class dining room behind me, and there was a row of about 10 friends. We all leapt to our feet to the astonishment of everyone else in the cinema. Like, residual check.
Crazy
people. He snuck me in, which is very fun indeed.
Okay, so Ghosts of the Abyss, it was an IMAX documentary produced by Disney. It was basically covered their 2001 dive, and they used some of the leftover sets, the few that didn't get destroyed. My favorite weirdest moment was they do show a scene of third class trapped behind a gate, but I guess all the steerage sets were already knocked down, but they still had the first class hallway. So for some reason it was like a first class hallway with not even a Bostwick gate like in most movies, like with bars, like jailhouse bars.
Maybe the office building in Vancouver wasn't available anymore.
Yeah, it was being renovated. So got the office building in Vancouver. I will never forget that. After Ghost of the Abyss, we moved on to Last Mysteries of the Titanic. I think it was after like several years of the most terrible Discovery Channel documentaries. He wanted to show them who's boss. So he filmed another dive to the wreck with Discovery, and this is where we get some of the best footage of the interiors of the ship, like how they are now. A lot of people think they're from Ghost of the Abyss, but they're not. They were filmed a few years later for Last Mysteries. So it's not the best documentary, but it's James Cameron, so it's always entertaining. And the stunning footage we see of all the the Turkish baths, the dining room, that makes in itself that it's a must see.
And it's also underscores the now legendary story that James Cameron really pitched his story about Titanic to the studios, to Paramount and Fox, because he wanted the money to go down to the wreck to film those present day scenes. I'm using my fingers because it's 25 years ago. That actually he had an ulterior motive, which was, yes, to make a movie, but he wanted to go down there. And of course, he's been several times since.
He's been going down.
And you have Titanic, The Last Word, but it wasn't The Last Word. I don't think I've seen that one. That was 2012.
No, it's not. It's infamous where he uses a banana to show how Titanic broke up. Like, it's been kind of memed to death. He wanted to show how the ship's keel, when the ship broke apart, that the ship's keel didn't break off and it got stuck, and pulled the stern after it, which I'm not even sure if that's actual kind of Titanic historians even argue about that. They argue about everything. I think this was actually the first time it went into, I mean, most Titanic nerds knew that, but this was the first time it went into public knowledge that Titanic was listing to port when it sank. Most people
and
don't
that it was a
that.
banana.
Yeah, and it was shaped like a banana. People also didn't know that. So that was... Then
finish us up here.
Yeah, after The Last Word, we went for the next Last Word, Titanic 20 years later, 2017. It was, to be honest, it felt a little anticlimactic. I think even James Cameron complained he wasn't given much time or money for it. They just do another kind of some more experiments on how it sank, how it broke up. It was interesting, but you can live without seeing it. Then came the best one ever earlier this year, Titanic 25 years later. So the final word.
It's the final one until the next one.
Yeah, the final one for now. And he at this point, I think James Cameron was already just so sick and tired, and that whole of the Titanic thing. But what I find hilarious is that whole documentary is based around that stupid meme about that Jack could have fit on the door, which was not the door, doesn't even look like the door, and I wish people would stop saying it's a door. It's paneling.
We know. So we're good.
He did a whole experiment on if two people would fit on that piece of wood paneling, and turns out they could. But he also said that he doesn't care because that's how he wrote the script. And I agree with him. I don't even know why that's even controversy. He wrote the script. It's his characters. That's how the story
he can do what he wants.
You never let the truth get in the way of a good story. That's exactly number one.
And on that note, we will say with the fact that one of the guilty pleasures I find are the schlocky Titanic movies, like the worse the better, like Titanic 666, from 2022.
Which is actually a sequel to Titanic 2. And it's acknowledged in the movie.
I mean, these are the things you come across them on cable and you think, oh, okay, well, there's nothing else on, I'll watch this. And then you can't even make it 10 minutes maybe. But that's a subject for a whole other podcast because we are out of time. But we've got to find your Facebook page. We're gonna put that out there. We know you did the commentary on SOS Titanic. You have got to do a film column or something, because the way you write and react to these Titanic video productions, film productions, it's very impressive. It's done with great respect, but also with a ton of humor. So I think if we're ever going to have a screening, you're the guy I'd want to sit next to during the screening.
I would love to.
I have a question. Do you have an ultimate all-time favorite version of a Titanic story? I mean, it's wonderful how you can pick apart and put together these documentaries and dramatizations that you've seen. Is there, James Cameron's version aside, is there another one that really you hold in very high esteem?
Okay, this will cause some raised eyebrows, but when I did briefly mention the Nazi version of Titanic, I think it is my favorite, not because it's obviously I am Jewish. I come from a family of Holocaust survivors. I find that version fascinating because to me it's the first modern Titanic film as we know it. It basically set up the template all other Titanic films followed. That's why I respect it. you can see in the James Cameron version, even if it's unintentional, the 96 miniseries, the Julian Fellows miniseries, SOS Titanic, 1953 Titanic, they all share that movie's DNA. It set up the idea that every Titanic movie is going to be essentially a very long episode of The Love Boat, and then everybody dies. And that's the best
I'm
I can
laughing
describe.
because that's very succinctly put. Yes. Yes, I understand that. And as a filmmaker yourself, you're able to break that down and see the provenance, so to speak. You can see the steps.
The tropes, the
tropes.
conventions.
Yes, yes.
Well, and still have the fun. You know, you can be critical of it, but and see the problems with something, but still enjoy the experience of viewing it. And that's what we Titaniacs are all about.
Controversial opinions aside, SOS Titanic, for all its flaws, I know it gets mocked on social media by people who just find out that it exists. I will always have a place in my heart for it because it was my first exposure to Titanic, and for what they had to work with, you know, it's a TV movie budget in the 70s. I think they did a great job. It could have used some fine tuning, yes. But, you know, it has some interesting subplots that don't appear in other Titanic films. And it has David Warner as a protagonist for once in his life. Even like a romantic protagonist. He's like the Leo of the film. So yeah, it's just, that's why it always gonna have a big place in my heart. So I guess it's a tie between SOS Titanic and the 1943 German film for what it accomplished as the leap in the evolution of Titanic in cinema.
And nowadays, how does Titanic play out in your life? If there's not a new documentary or dramatization coming out, how do you still connect yourself? Do you collect things? Do you just say to your wife, we're watching another one of these films tonight, you can stay and watch, or you can go in the other room?
Well, mostly at the moment I am single, and I'm mostly forcing my dog to watch them. She's not enthusiastic about them.
She loves the Titanic.
That's hilarious.
I have some Titanic. I mean, I have some friends that, you know, they don't really understand my obsession, but they respect it, and they do join me for Titanic movie marathons. And as of about a year and a half ago, maybe, I started collecting Titanic memorabilia and White Star Line memorabilia. And as everything with me, I went completely insane with it and blew it all out of old bore. So I have like a mini museum that I currently have packed away. I'm moving to a new condo, so I'm hoping to use the loft in there to make like a nice White Star Line ocean liner museum. So that, yeah, I keep myself connected. I mean, I get older, you know, I have more responsibilities, but Titanic never goes away.
No,
it certainly doesn't. And that is the moral of this episode of Titanic Talk. We are so grateful. Evgueni Mlodik, Alexandra, good to see you, my pal of 30-some years. And we'll see you on the next episode of Titanic Talk.
Always talking about Titanic.
If you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review. And if you'd like to hear more podcasts like this, hit the subscribe button. For information on where you can see Ship of Dreams, Titanic Movie Diaries, go to shipofdreamsfilm.com. Titanic Talk is a production of Ship of Dreams Film Limited. To celebrate Season 2 of Titanic Talk, we've launched a line of Titanic Talk merch. A cap, a mug, a tote, a t-shirt or a hoodie. You'll be sure to find a unique gift for the Titaniac in your life. Look for the link in the notes and on Instagram, or go to bit.ly/Titanic Talk Shop.